The person you know who works hard and stays poor.
Here is something that will make a lot of people uncomfortable. Poor people are not poor because they are lazy. They are not poor because they make bad decisions. They are not poor because they lack ambition. A 2013 study from Harvard, Princeton, and the University of Warwick proved something extraordinary, that poverty itself steals your ability to think your way out of it, that the system is not broken, it is working exactly as designed, and once you understand how it actually works, you will never see money the same way again. I want to start with a story, not a famous person, not a billionaire, not someone who made it against the odds. I want to start with someone you probably know. Maybe it's a relative, maybe it's a neighbor, maybe if you are being completely honest, maybe it is you. Picture this person. They wake up at 5 a.m. They work 10, 12 hours a day. They come home exhausted. They do it again tomorrow. They are not lazy. They are one of the hardest working people you have ever seen. And yet, every month, the money runs out. Before the month does, every month, there is a decision. This bill or that one. Food or the electricity. The school fee or the medicine. Every month, they are one emergency. One broken appliance, one medical bill, one missed day of work, away from a crisis that takes 6 months to recover from. Now here is the question that most people ask when they look at this person. Why don't they just save more? Why don't they invest? Why don't they make better decisions? And here is the question that this video is going to answer. What if that question is the wrong question entirely? What if the real question is, why is the system designed so that the people who can least afford to make mistakes are the ones forced to make the most decisions, under the most pressure, with the least information, and the highest consequences? That is what we are here to talk about today. And by the time this video ends, you will never look at poverty the same way again. In 2013, researchers from Harvard, Princeton, the University of Warwick, and the University of British Columbia published a landmark study in the journal Science. What they found changed the way the entire academic world thought about poverty. Here is what they discovered. When a poor person is confronted with a financial problem, any financial problem, how to pay an unexpected bill, how to cover rent this month, the cognitive strain it creates is equivalent to a 13-point drop in IQ, or the equivalent of losing an entire night's sleep. Let that land. 13 points of IQ gone. Not because the person is stupid, not because they don't care, because the financial stress alone, the weight of scarcity, the constant calculation, the never-ending arithmetic of not enough, consumes so much of the brain's working memory and processing power that there is simply less capacity left for everything else. The researchers called this cognitive bandwidth. Think of your brain like a phone. It has a certain amount of RAM processing power available at any given moment. When you are financially secure, your RAM is mostly free. You can think about your career, your health, your relationships, your future. When you are financially stressed, when every single day involves the mental arithmetic of survival, your RAM is almost entirely occupied. You are running 15 apps at once, and the phone is running hot, and there is almost nothing left for the things that could actually change your situation. This is not a character flaw. This is a neurological reality. The researchers specifically stated, the poor are not making bad decisions because they are poor. They are making decisions that appear bad from the outside because the cognitive cost of poverty has already consumed the mental resources that better decisions require. In other words, poverty is not the result of bad thinking. Poverty causes bad thinking. The trap is built into the trap. And here is the part that breaks my heart. Every time I think about it, the people working hardest to escape are working so hard that they have no bandwidth left to think about how to escape. The farmer who wakes at 4 a.m. and works until dark, who is so exhausted by the physical demand of survival that the idea of sitting down and thinking about financial strategy is not laziness. It is impossible, not won't, can't. There is a difference, and it matters enormously. So if poverty is a system, if it has mechanics that keep people inside it, what are those mechanics? Let me show you 5 traps that work together to make poverty almost impossibly hard to escape. Trap 1: you pay more for everything. Here is something that most middle class and wealthy people never think about. Being poor is expensive, not because poor people spend more than they should, because the entire financial system charges poor people more for the same things. Banks charge poor people higher interest rates because they are a higher risk. Poor people cannot buy in bulk because they don't have the storage space or the upfront money, so they pay more per unit for everything from food to soap. Poor people rent their homes instead of owning them, which means they pay a landlord's mortgage instead of building equity. Poor people use payday loans when an emergency hits because they have no savings, no credit, no other option, and those loans charge interest rates that can reach 400% annually. The less money you have, the more of what little you have is consumed by the cost of not having more. This is not a paradox. It is policy. It is the way the system works, and it is one of the most significant structural reasons why poverty persists across generations. Trap 2: the scarcity mindset. Researchers Sendhil Mullainathan and Eldar Shafir, who wrote a landmark book called Scarcity, described something they called the tunnel effect. When you are in scarcity, when you don't have enough of something critical, your brain automatically focuses all its attention on that thing. A hungry person can think of almost nothing except food. A financially stressed person can think of almost nothing except money. And this tunnel, this narrowing of focus, makes you better at managing immediate scarcity and much worse at everything else. You manage today. You cannot plan next year. You solve this month's rent. You cannot think about next year's investment. The tunnel keeps you alive. The tunnel also keeps you trapped. Trap 3: the knowledge gap. Here is a question. Where did you learn about compound interest? About assets versus liabilities? About how to read a financial statement? About the difference between spending money and investing it? For most people in this room, the honest answer is, I didn't. Not in school, not at home, not anywhere formal. Financial literacy, the actual knowledge of how money works, how it grows, how it is kept, is passed down privately. In wealthy families, it is taught casually, at dinner tables, in middle-class homes, and it is almost entirely absent from the education given to children in poor communities. This is not an accident. The person who grows up never hearing the word compound interest, never learning that money can make money, never understanding that the goal is not just to earn more, but to make what you earn work for you, that person will spend their entire working life on a treadmill that moves faster the harder they run, not because they are not smart, because they were never given the map. Trap 4: the emergency that resets everything. This is the trap that catches even the people who are doing everything right. Imagine you have spent 6 months being disciplined. You have cut expenses. You have saved a little. You are beginning, slowly, carefully, to build something. And then the car breaks down, or someone gets sick, or the roof leaks, or you lose a week of work. And in one event, one ordinary, unremarkable, completely predictable event of the kind that happens to everyone, 6 months of progress is erased. You are back to zero, or below zero. For wealthy people, an emergency is an inconvenience. They pay the bill, life continues. Their trajectory is unchanged. For poor people, an emergency is a reset button, and the tragedy is, this happens not once, not twice, repeatedly, across years, across decades. The person is not failing to make progress. They are making progress and having it taken away over and over and over again until they stop believing that progress is possible. And that belief, that quiet, reasonable, evidence-based belief that nothing will ever change, is the most dangerous trap of all. Trap 5: the identity trap. The fifth trap is the one nobody talks about because it lives not in the bank account, but in the mind. When you have been poor long enough, when scarcity has been the air you breathe, the water you drink, the story you have heard about yourself and your family, your entire life, your identity adjusts to it. You begin to see poverty not as a situation, but as who you are. We are not the kind of people who have money. People like us don't invest. That kind of life is for other people. These are not thoughts you consciously choose. They are conclusions your brain draws from a lifetime of evidence. And they are devastating because they make you turn down opportunities. They make you distrust good news. They make you self-sabotage at the exact moment when something could change. Not because you want to fail, because success feels more unfamiliar and dangerous than the poverty you have always known. The mind protects us from the unknown, and if wealth is unknown, if it has never been part of your story, your own mind will unconsciously work to keep you where it knows how to survive. Now, I want to be very careful here, because it would be easy and dishonest to end this conversation with 5 problems and no direction forward, and it would be equally dishonest to pretend that escaping poverty is simply a matter of thinking differently. It is not. Structural poverty requires structural solutions, policy change, educational reform, access to capital, healthcare, infrastructure. These are real. These matter enormously, and no individual mindset shift replaces them. But inside the system as it exists, inside the world as it is, rather than as it should be, there are things that genuinely change the trajectory. Not for everyone, not immediately, not without enormous effort and significant luck, but real things, real shifts that are worth knowing about. The first shift, from earning to owning. The single most consistent difference between people who escape poverty and people who don't is not income, it is assets. People who break out of poverty almost universally transition at some point from trading time for money to owning something that makes money without them. A small business, a piece of land, a skill that scales, an investment that compounds. The transition from I work and I get paid to I own something that works for me is the fundamental shift, and it almost never happens in one dramatic moment. It happens in the margins, the extra hour spent learning something that compounds, the small sacrifice made consistently until it accumulates into an asset, the decision made in the middle of the cognitive tunnel to set aside something for the future self, even when the present self is screaming for it. The second shift, one financial truth at a time. The knowledge gap cannot be closed overnight, but it can be closed one concept at a time. Compound interest, assets versus liabilities. The difference between spending and investing. These are not complicated. They are simply things that were not taught to people who needed them most. And once you understand them, once they become part of the way you see every financial decision, you cannot unsee them. You start asking different questions. Not, how do I spend this wisely? But, how do I make this work for me? Not, how do I survive this month? But, what am I building with the months I have? The third shift, protecting progress. The emergency reset trap has one known solution: An emergency fund. Not a large one. Not 3 months of expenses, all at once, but the deliberate, consistent, prioritized building of a buffer between you and the next crisis. Even small, even slow. The goal is not to never have emergencies. The goal is to have somewhere to absorb them without losing everything you have built. This sounds simple. It is simple. It is also one of the hardest things a person in genuine scarcity can do, because every month, the present need screams louder than the future protection, but the people who find the discipline to do it, even imperfectly, even inconsistently, are the people whose emergencies stop resetting the clock. Let me end with something that I think about a lot. We live in a world that tells poor people, work harder, that tells them, make better decisions, that tells them, if you just believed in yourself more, if you just had more discipline, if you just wanted it badly enough, you would not be poor. This narrative is comfortable for people who are not poor, because it makes poverty a personal failing, something the poor did to themselves, rather than a system that does something to them. And I want to be honest with you, that narrative is not entirely wrong. Mindset matters. Decisions matter. Belief matters. But it is also not entirely right. Because the same study that showed poverty steals IQ, the same research that revealed the cognitive bandwidth trap, also showed something that the hardworking poor have always known in their bones. Poor people are not less intelligent. They are not less motivated. They are not less deserving. They are playing a harder game, with worse cards, on a tilted table, and the first step to changing that, for yourself, for your children, for your community, is seeing the table for what it is, not accepting it, not being defeated by it, but seeing it clearly, because you cannot change what you cannot name, and now you can name it. Here is what I want you to walk away with. If you grew up without money, if you are currently without money, if the system has been taking more from you than it gives, that is not evidence of what you are worth. It is evidence of the system you were born into. And systems, unlike talent, unlike character, unlike worth, can be understood. And once understood, they can be navigated, not perfectly, not without pain, not without help, but navigated. The 5 traps are real. You pay more for everything. Your bandwidth is occupied. You were not given the map. The emergencies reset the clock, and your identity may have adjusted to fit the cage. Knowing this does not unlock the cage instantly, but it does mean you stop blaming yourself for the cage. And when you stop spending your energy on shame, you have more energy left for the one thing that actually moves the needle. The next decision, not all the decisions, not the perfect strategy, not the complete transformation. The next decision, made with whatever bandwidth you have, with whatever knowledge you've gathered, with whatever small amount you can set aside before the emergency comes. One decision at a time, one asset at a time, one truth at a time. That is how the cycle breaks. Not in one dramatic moment, in 100 quiet ones that nobody sees, until the day they cannot ignore what you have built. Poverty is not a character flaw. It is a system. Systems can be understood. Start there.